Joan Friedman, hero of the day, week, and month, is with us. Those of you who saw your email yesterday saw that Joan has put all of the offerings online. And I'm going to ask if Joan could stay at the very end of class. We're going to give Joan the podium to talk to us about how best to access that, what to do if we see some edits or omissions, and so that we can just thank her. Joan, I know it was a work of love over months, and we're so appreciative. So with that, Adria, would you like to say something about Lily Boulanger and her Psalm 24?
Just Lily Boulanger was the younger sister of Nadia Boulanger. Nadia Boulanger was the world-renowned teacher, musician. She taught Copland, Stravinsky, Bernstein, many great musicians. Younger sister Lily, who bested her sister Nadia by winning the Prix de Rome, which her sister sought for many years for herself. But tragically, Lily died at the age of 25. And I think the recording that I brought to Harold's attention has Nadia actually conducting Lily's take on Psalm 24.
Wow.
And it's
she did a few psalms, didn't she? Didn't Lily do
yes,
a few psalms?
yes. But this I was just curious, but this is 24.
Yeah, she did 24, 29, and 130.
So anyway, I played for some reason I played a lot of her music where strings have been involved with the vocalist, and it's all just really wonderful stuff. And again, music that perhaps has languished for whatever reason, but should be brought to attention and to our concert stages, as there's so much repertoire that falls into that category. Anyway.
All right, here it is, and it is very dramatic, I will say that.
The class and learn to make egg toast really good. Delicious.
Wow, that's one powerful piece of music. Rabbi, did we lose you? Did I- Hello?
I was still on mute.
Oh.
Nadia Boulanger is somebody I've known about for a long time because of my interest in the Bernstein Copeland world. And I had known her sister was a composer, but had never actually heard any of her music. And I know that Nadia Boulanger spent a lot of her life advocating for her sister's music as well, right? She was like
After her sister passed,
right.
she devoted the rest of her own life to making sure that her sister's music would live on, and conducted quite a bit of it. Her sister used to follow her to the Conservatoire National, to her classes, and sit in the back, as a 5-year-old.
Uh-huh.
And evidently she just soaked up everything. But the more that I listen to this, I wonder if Copeland was familiar with this piece, because there's a lot of it in there, the way it's written and scored, that reminds me of the use of brass and timpani in Fanfare for the Common Man,
So
which came out of Copeland's Third Symphony. So you never know what the threads
Yep.
are. It's just interesting that it's a good party game. But
Yep, a good party game.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
thank you for that. I hope people are getting the sense of the power of this psalm. This psalm has inspired many different major composers. We heard that Lewandowski yesterday, which is the classic, became and still is done in many Reform and conservative synagogues. I didn't know about the conservative world. And now Joyce and I talked about it yesterday. Now it's become very popular among Orthodox men's choruses to record the Lewandowski piece. Lewandowski himself wrote for a mixed chorus in the 1800s. He was using women's voices for the high voices. But if you go where most of the choruses who are now recording it are all men, because they're Orthodox, men and boys, because they're Orthodox. But Lewandowski actually, he conducted the chorus, and it was a mixed chorus in Germany. Anyway, or Austria. Was it Germany or Austria? We have some cantors here, we'll know. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. And we're going to continue today with Psalm 24. Let's look at, shall we look at Bernstein? Do we have Bernstein ready to look at?
Of course we do. And let's get a hand for reader. Okay, as I'm sharing the screen. Maybe maybe Randy would like to read it, since it's maybe her last day with us for a while. How's that?
Or
Make it a little bigger.
yes, please.
Okay, here we go.
It's all God's. The endless universe and everything within belong to him. God set up ocean patterns, galaxies, and DNA. So who of us could ever reach the top, to rise above ourselves, to keep our hearts and deeds as pure as God's intent? Perhaps it's those who seek to know his ways. They are so blessed in the endeavor, in the quest to find and open gates of heaven, to see God, the source of all, unknown.
So again, it's obvious Bernstein isn't focused on the specific architecture. She doesn't keep to the number of psukim, of verses. She doesn't care about the superscription. She's going for what part of this psalm is personal to her. And she again uses him. And in the Orthodox world, that's totally standard. I don't think she thinks of it that way. It's just, as we all know, what that happens. So it's pretty interesting here. A few comments, and then we can ask if there are those who want to react to it. And maybe you'll have in front of you one of the, either Levy or one of the other translations. So you could see that she's referencing what she's using is some contemporary words that the psalmist, of course, would never have known, to acknowledge the completeness of God's presence, right? So the scientist, is using a word like DNA. When the psalmist wrote this psalm, nobody knew about DNA, but what she's trying to make the point is that God is everywhere. God's presence is everywhere. And as I said earlier, the Orthodox believe in science because, and the argument goes, God has created science, so it's up to us as human beings to employ science. And so I love that she uses DNA as, it's not just oceans and rivers, which are obviously known then and known now, but she's using galaxies, which is also, although that's kind of referring to heavens, it's a little bit more contemporary concept of the heavens than just the heavens, right? So she's really using that to emphasize God is everywhere, even in places that the original psalmist had not yet understood exist in the world, implying there are things we don't yet know about, and God would be there also. And so how does she refer to this concept, miyale, who is going to go up to the mountain? So who of us could ever reach the top? I love that imagery. Who of us? To rise above ourselves, to keep our hearts and deeds as pure as God's intent. So you can see how she's using the original language of the psalm to do something quite, I think it's a very, that second verse I think is quite creative. And then instead of reading this psalm as it could be read as kind of a harsh, only those who do X, Y, or Z, and you have to do this in order to be, and I interpret that as aspirational, but I think she does, she asks the question, as the psalm asks a question, who of us could ever reach the top? Who of us could do this? Who, etc. And then verse 3 is, perhaps it's those who seek to know his ways. And I think that's a reference to the Jacob concept, that the seeking is what matters, and the evolution, the creation of ourselves in the process of seeking, they are so blessed in the endeavor and the quest. But she, unlike Mitchell, doesn't ignore the gates and the Su Sha'arim Roshechem. She sees it as more internal, in the sense of open the gates of heaven to see God, the source of all unknown. Okay, so a few comments or reactions or questions about Bernstein.
Linda Solomon.
And again, it's helpful if you have a full translation in front of you while we're talking about these. Linda?
A couple of snippets that I caught. First of all, her use of endless universe, which means that God is present even today. So that takes in the DNA and all the things that are happening now. Another thing that caught my eye was in my book, it says those blessed instead of they are blessed in the third paragraph there. And it has a different meaning to me when it says those blessed, because who seek to know his ways, those blessed, in the endeavor and the quest to find and open gates of heaven, to see God. And then the other thing that caught my eye is that she uses his right above that. So I thought those were interesting little snippets.
And obviously these are interpretive translations. Yeah, she's very much in the traditional Orthodox way of using masculine genders for God. Excellent, thank you.
Lori
Lori.
Krogman, welcome back.
Welcome back, all of you.
All of me plus. I love the line, and this is my philosophy of life, to rise above ourselves, because it really, for me, not that it takes the pressure off, but it says whatever I do like this, I do that, I try to be a good person, I try to do this, I can't really make it, but that's not what's important. That's just my little self. But when I get the few times in my life I've actually been able to rise above myself, it's just peaceful. It just is. I love that concept.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think it's ironic that sometimes the way we can feel best about ourselves is when we're rising above ourselves a little bit and not so focused on ourselves. That's why I think sometimes the best way to respond to despair is to actually think of something you could be doing for somebody else. But sometimes and that's of course the hardest time to rise above ourselves, right? Where we're so drawn into our deepest pain. It's one of the paradoxes of being a human being.
Shep.
Yeah, I like the last 5 words because we know about the galaxies and the DNA that God created. But I like that one, the source of all unknown, even the stuff we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that idea, the unknown.
I do
We know the
too. I
known,
do
but
too.
the unknown.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's also a sense of humility as a human being, right? We don't know everything. And that acknowledges that. Shep, what happened to you? Now you're like a big blob, a gray blob. Okay.
Lisa Brown?
So I like, I'm not sure how she's thinking of ocean patterns and galaxies and DNA, but these things seem to be set patterns. So I really feel her next question very literally. So how can you transcend that? These are sort of really structurally built into you. This is how God made you. And how are you supposed to transcend how God created us with all our limitations? And then she answers it. So I really like this interpretation a lot.
Thank you. I do too. I like that through flow, that development. Thank you.
So,
all right, Harold, let's look at if we have at Manda, if
certainly.
we may.
Manda.
Manda.
Okay, here we are. All right, we need a reader for Manda, and I think that Sarah Siegel had raised her hand before. Sarah?
Thanks. Okay. Thanks for making it bigger. The earth and everything on it belongs to the mother. All creatures are hers. It was she who formed the land from the sea and made it stable for us to walk upon. What woman can go up to the mountains and be with the mother? Who can stand in her holy presence? She who has done right and has a pure heart. She who is honest and has not spoken untruths of anyone will go. Such a daughter will receive the blessing of the mother and be saved by her intercession. Such is the heritage of those who follow her, of those who belong to the mother of all. Lift up your heads and open the doors of yourselves to Ruach. Welcome her breath into you. Who is she, this God so glorious? She is Shekhinah, Chochmah, Sophia, and Ruach, our wise mother and Amazon God. Lift up your heads and open the doors of yourselves to Ruach. Welcome her breath into you. Who is she, this God so glorious? She is Shekhinah, Chochmah, Sophia, and Ruach, our wise mother and Amazon God.
Well, if this isn't right out of the 1970s, I don't know what is, right? This just brings me right back to my 1970s world, but I love it. So let's talk about this a little bit. So first of all, notice that she does stick to the architecture and she keeps the 10 verses labeled. So always notice these things when you encounter a new psalm. And she does very much a strict flipping of masculine for feminine. And let's talk about it a little bit. I see Judy Hollander has her hand up. I always want to know what Judy has to say about these.
Okay, I just wanted to say that it didn't die in the 70s. That if you're involved at all with earth-based Judaism or earth-based religion, Gaia, that the earth as the center, that this language is compatible with this. So it's
so
very,
talk about, I don't, I'm saying that as a, I'm not being.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure that I said that.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that very much. So let's talk about it. Let's open this up. Where did she write them?
Well, there's some interesting things in the chat. Monica Raymond says, oi, totally a throwback. This just seems laughable to me. And Sue Rosansky said, I could live happily in the 70s. And then Lisa Brown says, if only Mary Daly was a Jew. I don't know who Mary Daly was. When did she write this? Monica, you seem to be really taking issue with her.
Harold, did you say you didn't know who Mary Daly was? Who said that?
I said, I don't know who Mary Daly was.
Mary Daly is a very famous Christian
Catholic
Catholic feminist theologian. And she wrote very interesting work, especially about purity and impurity and menstruation and
Huh,
things like that.
okay.
Very,
I'll need
I
to-
studied a lot of her. Yeah, she's a very, very interesting feminist theologian, Catholic. I'm sorry, Judy, I said Christian. And Monda's book, by the way, was published in 2004.
Right.
And I'm looking in the US. Notre Dame is the publisher is Ave Maria Press.
Huh. But I would guess if she's published in 2004, she worked on these previously, but.
Yes, yep.
Anyway. So Marcia Melnick.
So I really dislike this. I mean, it's such an obvious kind of shift from the male to the feminine. And recently, my great nephew said to me in a letter I wrote for him about he drafted something and he wrote wife, your wife. And I said, I'm going to edit that. Susan is not my wife. I really dislike this binary approach to the world. I just really bristle at it. I feel strongly that God in particular is not binary. For me, it doesn't fall into a binary category. If the universe is open and unknown and beyond, God is not a woman now. So anyway, I could go on, but that's my reaction.
Well, that's good. As I keep
This
saying,
seems simplistic.
It's good to have strong reactions, positive, negative, and that's why I appreciate that somebody offered this book, so I could offer some other examples. And definitely all of these won't work for everybody.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Lisa Brown.
So Rabbi, you're thinking of Mary Douglas. So Mary Daly.
Douglas.
Yeah, Mary Daly was an
I know Mary Daly.
Yeah, an outrageous.
I know them both.
Yeah, just so the class.
You're right. You're right. They're both right. Douglas wrote the purity stuff.
Yeah, Mary Daly, I was riffing on as sort of a joke because she just wrote this outrage. She was, like very smart, but very interesting, but very outrageous feminist lesbian literature of the 1970s.
Yeah. I knew both of them. You're right. So I apologize. My brain isn't what it was.
Dean Dresser. Dean.
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah, I'm with Marcia, but I also think that this really shows the limitation of male language also, because it puts it to the extreme in the female, as if that would fix anything.
Yeah.
It's just a lesson on revolutionaries who take the opposite position just to take the opposite position. So this feels like every revolution that turned into the very thing it was revolting against, blah, blah, blah. So.
Oh. Judy Hollander again?
Yeah, I just want to say that I also have always had trouble with the binary in any way when it comes to praying. Even coming to praying without that is a problem. But that I am interested that the strong negative reaction that people are having. And I noticed that when it took a long time before people had an equally strong negative reaction to seeing everything with the male gender. So I just think that's an interesting observation. This class surprised me as how much we did focus on the he and not liking it. But if you think of when Judith Plaskow started and in the 90s and this from the 70s, how long it's taken us to even think about these things. So.
Well, I think the weakness of Manda is actually, I don't think she is such a great writer. I actually think that we're not seeing a great writer struggle through with gender play. That might be from my perspective. So it just the language itself is a little bit simplistic or simple in a way, and not. I don't find the word painting here as strong as I do in other places. But I love for people to have strong reactions, which is why I want. It helps to sharpen both when we have negative reactions as well as positive reactions. It sharpens what we're looking for. And I do think And then I always challenge myself, okay, this might not be my personal favorite, but I do see things in here that move me. And that's what I want us all to do, is to look at something and find something. Like, I love the line, lift up your heads, Roshechem, and open the doors of yourselves to Ruach. I love that line. So that line for me makes this whole psalm worthwhile. So yes, okay.
So,
Other
speaking of
comments?
strong reactions, Monica Raymond actually says this takes the worst of theism and the worst of feminism and smushes them together.
Tell us what you really think, Monica.
Thank you for that. And then Sarah Siegel says, lift up your heads and open the doors of yourself to Ruach, welcome her breath into you. She said, does this seem sexual to anyone else? And then she said, did I just write that in chat? And then a lot of
Oh, I love this group. I love this group.
How, having a reaction against the female pronoun just shows us how used we are to the male pronoun, and how both of them are difficult. Jeremy Lawrence.
I just wanted to say that I join the Dean, Marcia, Judy, and others camp. I always, and I'm not camping around. I always felt when gay marriage became a major issue that we were in danger of being incorporated into heterosexual terminology, and that we had to fight against that. And I remember it was very close to that period of time when the man who was to become my lover of 24 years turned to me out of the blue and says, I don't want to get married even if we can. And I said, I don't either. And I was full of anger.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Sherry Dratfield.
Well, and some of us remembers the, who was it? Was it Tom from Lambda? And Paula Edelbrick went on that speaking tour many years ago about whether or not Paula was against gay marriage. Was it Tom Stoddard?
Tom Stoddard, yeah.
I can't remember. They did a whole speaking tour where one was against marriage for gay people and the other was for it. It was okay, who can remember?
Can I just add one last thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I gave a Josh at BCC at the time saying, please don't leave those of us who don't want to be defined by a relationship, who would rather be alone to be defined. Don't leave us behind.
Wow. So Sherry or Simon?
It's Sherry.
Yes, it was Tom Stoddard. I just looked it up. Yeah, Tom Stoddard.
Simon's unfortunately on a business call. So we haven't gotten to Rabbi Schachter Shalomi yet. And
yeah, that's going to come next. As soon as we
I know I'm really taken by this book. And I just want to mention it here because there's a way to incorporate female, male, they, she, he, they in a totally inclusive way. This may not be it, but if we could piece them all together, it might create that sense and maybe diffuse some of the outrage, anger, dismissiveness of either. So I have trouble when I hear he, and yet reading this, now I'm more understanding of the he.
Well, good. That's what it's about, right? Is honing our senses. Cantor Nimi.
Yeah, for me, I always go back to this idea that any word to describe God is really metaphor, because God is so beyond our understanding.
Right.
I'm sure that I learned this from Rachel Adler. I'm sure she also learned it elsewhere too, but B'Shem Omro, that's where I learned it from. This idea that the only solution then is to use as many different kinds of metaphors as possible and find the ones that some of them will work for us sometimes and not other times.
I'm with you. I agree.
So like for me, sometimes I do connect to God as a mother, and sometimes as a shepherd, and sometimes as my rabbi, and sometimes as my chaplain, and like all of these things that can work, but they don't all work for me all the time.
Right. Right, I completely agree. And the hymn that traditional synagogues sing after services before the end of the service on Shabbat morning, Anim Zmirot, some of you might know it if you come from a more traditional background, has all of these crazy images of God in there that, you know, some as a young boy, some as an old man of war, man of peace. Like, even though it's masculine because it's a medieval piyut, it still shows all these different metaphors, and they exist. That why do we sometimes we, and I heard a great shiur on it once, sometimes we need to feel like whatever it is that made the universe has power and is strong. Sometimes we need, just like Pantronimi said, a gentle shepherd or an older, wiser. Sometimes the age issue changes in our minds and in our relationship as we age. And there isn't a single metaphor, a single explanation that will suffice long term, right? It's always going to be shifting and changing. And the more you have in your toolbox, so to speak, the more it will be accessible when you need it. So let's look at Shachter Shalomi, our newest book in our library. And Shachter Shalomi was a Hasidic rabbi, I mentioned, Holocaust survivor, that he encountered the Eastern religions early in the world of Westerners encountering Eastern, and he became deeply engaged in Eastern religion. And as I said, he is the one Jewish practitioner of Eastern traditions that is actually deeply, deeply knowledgeable as a Jew in the leadership in this generation that brought this stuff. And he became, because he's a scholar and a deeply religious person, he became quite engaged. And he also brings his Jewish together. I strongly recommend people get to this, get the book itself, the introduction's interesting, etc. And so let's look at Psalm 24. Do we have a reader for this? And look at,
Sherry had said she wanted to get.
okay, great.
Why don't we have Sherry?
And Sherry, would you start with the superscription?
Oh, yes, thank you. Psalm 24, for opening himself to spirit, David's song. Earth and her fullness are yours, Yah, the cosmos and its beings. You founded earth on the endless seas of space. You set her by the streams of the great flow. Who can rise to your summit, Yah? Who can stand in your place of holiness? One who has hands that are clean, a heart that is pure, who has no false oath on her conscience, who swore not to larceny. Such a one will raise a blessing from you, Yah, kind generosity from you, her helpful God. Such people are of a generation that seeks you, like Jacob seeking to face you, Selah. Open your mind's imagination. Let the gates to eternity come into view. Then the King of glory will appear. Who is this, the King of glory? Yah Tsebayot, God of diversity. She is the Queen of glory. Yah, powerful and strong. Yah, the ever victorious. Open your mind's imagination. Let the gates to eternity come into view, and then the King of glory will appear. Who is this? The King of glory. Yah Tsebayot. She is the Queen of glory. Selah.
Beautiful, thank you. So first of all, notice he does incorporate the superscription. He has an interpretation of Le David Mizmor, and he ignores the numbers, but he sticks pretty closely, I'd say, to the architecture of the psalm. So the way he begins, oops, where's my Hebrew? Just a second, grab the Hebrew. Again, I love it when they have the Hebrew there, which I get. They don't want to do that because it makes the book so big. Let me get back to the Hebrew. So so you'll notice that he reinforces Yah, the capital of the, making the H capitalized is reinforcing the mapik in the hay, which makes it aspirated. So you say Yah. So it sounds like a breath. So that's how the Hebrew word Yah, and that is what the ending of the word hallelujah is. Hallel is to praise, Yah is God of the God of the breath. So yours is capitalized, and you see he does play with gender. So Sherry, do you want to talk about that? Because you were referring to that before. So do you want to talk about that now that it's in front of all of us?
Yes, first of all, the seeker is in the feminine. And sort of lulled into thinking, well, then God is the masculine, the seeker's the feminine. And then who is this, the King of glory? And the diversity right in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sebaot, she is the queen of glory. So it's this melding of male and female, but it goes far further than that, because it mentions Sebaot, which is diversity, not just male or female. In my view, it's they, them. It's just really a brilliant way to merge it all.
And by the way, Zalman, when he says very explicitly that his goal is to, first of all, he sees the Psalms as prayer, that they are there as prayer, and he's trying to create prayer in English that's accessible. So he really sees this as prayer. I do too. I think the book of Psalms is a book of prayers. It's not prose, it's not narrative, it's not historical, it's not wisdom literature only. It is really prayer fundamentally. So and notice that he does use Jacob, and he's using Jacob and explaining why Jacob is important for this psalm. Such people are of a generation that seeks you, like Jacob seeking to face you. So he doesn't want to get rid of Jacob, which is a little obscure, and he explains it so that when some of us were asking, why is Jacob there? This is his understanding of why. We are modeling, we are honoring, we understand that seeking is an aspirational goal, to be looking for God's presence, to seeking God's presence. Okay, so let's take some comments and thoughts about, and Zalman is I think a very good liturgist and writer of prayers, and he did a lot of it. He's no longer alive. So his work is very, very interesting, I think.
Ruth Play,
so maybe
you want to say something? I know you put something in chat. Did you want to discuss that?
Yeah, I was just I just made a comment that I really like this interpretation. I mean, I like many of the others as well, but I love the fact he's merged the male and the female, which I believe is really the truth of the humanity and as our and having been created in the image of God, I think we are everything. But that's my own personal belief.
Yep. And I think that's why it's interesting to read Zalman. He has a lot of depth that I appreciate. But I think it's important to see if we could write a whole psalm in the feminine and push ourselves to try and find that access as well. I like his Su Sha'arim Rashechem. I like the way he goes, open your mind's imagination, instead of, so he sees what his concept of the gates are minds. The Hebrew, let me just go back to the Hebrew so you can see. Su Sha'arim Rashechem, open your mind's imagination. Us'u Pitrei Olam, let the gates of eternity come into view. Part of what we have to do is explode the way we think. It's on us to create a bigger imagination. Jack Neiman.
Morning, everyone. I
Good
just
morning.
wanted to, Doreena's comment reminded me of, if you're raised in a Christian tradition, you're really taught not to question anything. So this is, I mean, you have to have faith. That's what you're told. Don't question, you have faith. So this is, this concept of the followers not questioning anything is so, different from Judaism, which is constantly analyzing and questioning. And that's the good part. I mean, it's good to question. So I'm just trying to give, that reminded me of like, that's what I didn't like about, don't question. You have to question, right?
And the assumptions that we have about God, as Cantor Nimi said, are really part of the essential questioning that we have to do, is to go to places where we might feel uncomfortable, to ask ourselves, what is it that's making us uncomfortable, including moving towards a feminine. If it feels so awkward to do the feminine, exactly as we've said, then we've got to be able to be that awkward with the complete masculine. And Zalman uses both in this particular one. So there is feminine there. It's not just. And there's a lot of discussion. Well, should it just all be removed so there's no gender? Because not everything's so binary. And there's a lot of debate going on right now, how to come up with and options that are there that express all different things. And we don't know where we're going to be in 20 years in discussing this. But I want to make sure, Judy Hollander, I totally respect and support that point of view, and want to
I
make
don't
sure
know,
you know
but
that.
this really stepped on a nerve.
Yeah, this really stepped on a
For
nerve.
me
but
too. For me too. I've really revved up here. I want
You
to
want
say,
to say something else? Go ahead.
Yeah. The Reconstructionists, all these years, source, all the ways they mention God. I've never found it anything that I felt other than as a bystander and observer. It did not bring me in. And I just say from my experience with the women that I became friends with in Kohenet, that many of them were so alienated from Judaism that without Kohenet or a Gaia, earth-based, feminine, female, not perspective, they never would have been able to enter. And whether they stayed there or moved to a broader thing, that I don't know. But I just say that just never forget that it is Mother Earth that we all live on, and that seemed to be the cure. Anyway, I could go on for a long time, and I just am surprised at my own strong reaction to everybody else's reaction.
Well, I trust strong reactions, and I think it's fantastic. And I think these are really the deep questions about life. And isn't it great we get to talk about them while we're studying Psalms?
So,
and
Rabbi,
again, there is no right and wrong. This is all about coming to accessing a connection to the transcendent and using our ancient texts. So it's fantastic conversation.
I'm conscious of the time, and that, Rabbi, we're sending you off on 3 weeks of time away from the class.
Yeah.
And that I sent a note out. So we certainly send you with our blessings for trying to be able to find some breath yourself. I sent a note out to the class that there is no class on Monday because it's 4th of July, and then Rabbi Rapport will be teaching us next week and the week after on the Psalms of Psuche de Zimra, the Psalms of the morning service, and then Rabbi Moskowitz will be teaching us. Is it Psalm 30 that he's teaching us, or is he going to be going through a number of Psalms, Rabbi? Do you know?
I don't know that he knows yet.
Okay.
And I'm going to be working next week, but I really need next week to focus on high holidays. I need to just completely do a deep dive into high holidays, but I'll be leading services on the 9th. So for those of you who are there, I will see you there. It's just next week I need complete focus on high holidays, and then I'll be off for a couple of weeks and then back August 2nd.
And then we have a week of vacation where there is no class at all. If I could turn this over then to Joan to if we could give Joan screen share, and you could show us what you did and how we can best access it and use it, because I know there's a lot of.
And thank you, Joan. It is so moving, and we have to talk about how we're going to put this on the CBST website as well.
Question, is Psalm 24 due on Sunday?
No, Michael, there are no offerings until the rabbi comes back in August. If you want to do a Psalm 24 offering, that's great. Do it and just put it in the file. We will not be reading offerings with Rabbi Rapport or Rabbi Moskowitz. They will just be teaching us.
But we can just send it in normally.
If you want to send it in, yes, that's fine.
Okay. We're done with Psalm 24, is that correct?
This is it. Yeah, this was it for Psalm 24, yes.
Thank you.
Joan, can we give Joan?
But Psalm 24 is the Psalm for Sunday, so you can say it every Sunday and
Every
be
Sunday.
aligned with Jews all around the world.
If we could give Joan screen share, and I'm going to highlight her, and Joan, you can walk us through this site. Is that okay? Or
Okay, let's see, share screen. Host
Got it?
disabled presumed screen sharing.
okay, Tasha, can we give Joan screen share? Oh yeah, now you got it.
Okay. Share screen and that one. Okay, let's see.
There you go. We see it now.
Okay, so the thing here is that lots of people, I want to say first that lots and lots of people, none of whom were me, did a huge amount of work to create all these psalm offerings and to collect them. Right, so I've done this piece to make them visible in a particular way. And I'm glad everybody's so happy about it. And I don't want to take credit, and I only want credit for the part I actually did. Now, is everyone looking at something that says CBST Psalms
Yep,
class?
you got it right
Okay.
there. Got it right.
Right, which Harold sent the link for, and I had put the link in the chat a bunch of times. And so this is an entry page. We were trying to do this. Harold said one of the requirements was that the CBST website would only have to have one link to one place. And other than that, we were not going to impose on the CBST website. So here's the entry place. And there's some notes and then just a numbered listing of Psalms. And if you click on one of them, you get to that collection. And they all start with a list of contributors. And so if you see how, now, if I go right here.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
With this one, I did do a little bit of putting things out of order. And the point was that it just so happened that if I moved Judy Frank's offering up earlier out of order, that all these other people's 2-page offerings showed up on one screen.
Great.
So that was sort of a nice thing.
So show us how you're turning the pages with that click noise.
Okay.
How do we do that?
So if you put your cursor in the bottom right or in the right-hand corner, top or bottom, and then click, you go forward. If you put your cursor on the top left, you go back. If you put it on the bottom left, you might go back, but you also might go to CBST.
Okay.
Now, here's another thing. If you're at this beginning page and you click on Contributors Index, we have an alphabetical list of everybody who.
Wow.
Now, one thing we never did figure out was, or even address, was how to include, videos, right? So all the videos are missing and they're going to stay missing until there's some figuring out of how to change that. But there's text and there's pictures. There's some things that are missing. But for example, if you're Lisa Brown and you want to check and see, is my Psalm 10 really what I thought it, the way I want, then there you are.
It's so funny because I wanted to submit Psalm 10, but we skipped over it and I didn't submit it. And that was the one Psalm that I actually had wanted to submit, but I never did. It's so funny.
So
is this what you submitted? Is this what you would have?
I would have, but it was one of the Psalms that Rabbi Rapport taught, and we didn't take offerings for
that. So
I don't know. It was. So here's
wait.
another thing. I worked from the materials that Howard had available to send me. Everyone, please check to make sure that your contributions are not missing or are not mangled. And if they are missing or if they are mangled, just send the correct stuff to me as an email attachment, and I will, do the edits and get it in there.
Okay. So everybody, I sent the link out in an email that went to everybody who's getting the emails. And Joan has put the link into chat a few times. You can take it out of chat or you can open the email that we sent you. It is not right, it's not on the Facebook page. It is not on the CBST website right now. I would say it's in a beta stage so that everyone can check it out and just make sure that Joan, this was months of work. This went way above just taking my PDFs and putting them in. Joan really, this is an offering in and of itself. So check with, take a close look, and if there's anything that's not quite right, Joan is standing by to edit this so that it is the final version. And her email was included in my email, and her email is included in chat. So Joan, just a few more navigation things. On the upper right, those arrows can be used to flip pages also?
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing is, if you just kind of click on something, it'll get bigger for you.
Wow.
Amazing.
Right? Now, another thing is that there's a bar here, right? So you can go backwards. Now, this is Psalms 9 and 10. Just suppose, like, this is Psalm 9. Oh, I want to look at Psalm 8. Go to this corner. And it should take you to the author's listing for Psalm 8. Right?
Wow.
When you get to the very end and what would turn the page be? Well, send me to the next listing. And I usually have a monitor and a laptop, and the monitor just kind of goes out periodically, which it just did. And that's what happened to the screen share. The other thing is, I am on Facebook. So if you want to reach me and all the other things that have been said don't work, and you don't happen to know somebody that knows my email address, I am on Facebook, so you can reach me that way.
All right. So
amazing, Joan. Thank you. Amazing.
You so much. And I think that once, Joan, you will let us know when everyone has gotten in touch with you and you've done the updates, and we can talk about publicizing this to the wider CBST community.
I will know when I've gotten, some people have already said to me, these of mine are missing.
Right.
And here they are, or these are missing, and I will get them to you. So once I've gotten all the corrections or changes or additions that people have told me about and gotten them integrated, then I can tell you. I am not like monitoring to make sure everybody gets.
But let's say by next Friday, everyone should take a look at this and get Joan any changes, and we will figure that by next Friday, if you have anything to say to Joan, you have said it to Joan. How's that?
This is not because you can't ever say anything later. It's because Harold wants a cutoff for making the collections public to the CBST community.
All right, Lisa, you had a quick question or no?
My quick question is I found my Psalm 10. So is it only text that's there? There's no music, right? There's no link to any music.
There's no music. I'll let Joan answer that.
Right. There's no videos and therefore no music. I would love, this is a starting point. I would love to figure out a way to make videos available and music. And anybody who's interested in those questions, start emailing me about it or start a discussion about it in the Facebook. Let's think about it and figure it out. Since we weren't using the CBST website, except we're just going to have a link, the flip books are actually hosted on the website of the company whose software I use to transfer the PDF to a flip book. And the first couple pages are in my Medium account. And neither of those have, like storage space for videos. So if we could figure out where to put the videos, then it would not be a big deal to have a page that links to them.
Can I ask another quick question about copyright? Because my text is taken from.
Folks, I'm going to have to go. I have another meeting.
Okay, bye-bye, Rabbi.
The room can stay open, okay?
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
So copyright. So my songs are taken, one of the songs is taken from Gaia Bernstein's book. So do we have any copyright issues there?
As long as what we're doing
Strashfield is reaching up to unmute herself to talk about copyright issues.
Oh, good, somebody who knows.
I would say that we should acknowledge that. So if you, if the entire psalm is whatever, if you put an asterisk and you just acknowledge it at the bottom, that should be fine.
Yeah.
If you want it to Joan and me, I'll look at it and Joan and I will figure out how to deal with it. But if you are primarily, if you're using something incidentally, it doesn't matter. But if you're taking an entire chunk, a big chunk, then we should acknowledge it. So anybody with that issue, send it to me and Joan and we'll figure it out, okay?
And the video from Celebration of Psalms, which has all of the other videos in it, is already on the CBST YouTube. There are a number of songs that Cantonimi sang that we don't have recordings of, but we can work on that. Mickey?
I started to say, because I work in academic libraries, usually in conjunction with a class, which this is actually as a part of a structured learning environment, and we're not doing it for commercial purposes of any means, and we're not, making money off of it. As long as we acknowledge it and it has basically in context of a class, we're usually within copyright laws.
Yeah, it's called fair use. Right. And acknowledging it is fine. You're absolutely right.
And to answer a question that Shari and Debbie asked, yes, at this point, it only includes offerings that were submitted through Hanukkah and that were shared. I know that there are some people who had offerings that they just posted directly on Facebook. We did not go through to harvest Facebook to check them against offerings. If you posted an offering on Facebook and did never read it in class or never sent it to me or Annika, you can send it to Joan, and if I'm correct, Joan can add it to that Psalms offerings.
Right. The one thing I will say is that if you are adding something to an even numbered psalm, then it's going to be very easy to add without creating a lot of work. If it's an odd numbered psalm, because of a lot of technical things that I will only explain to people who tell me they're interested, what we have online, as you might have noticed, is Psalms 9 and 10, 19 and 20. It's like that, they're in order. So that if we're adding something to an odd numbered psalm, I have to either kind of put it with that psalm, but in the middle of all the PDFs, and then I have to redo all the links for the following psalm because the pages, have changed, or I can put it at the end, right? So we have Psalm 9 and we have Psalm 10. Just suppose you're adding something for Psalm 9.
Right, because
I can put your name on the bottom of the Psalm 9 list, but it's less work if I stick it at the very end.
You could also, depending on how many there are, we have an addenda that these Psalms were not shared in class, but they can be linked to the author, etc.
Right.
So I think, any other questions right now for Joan or about this project? Joan, thanks again. I know from over a year ago, you're the person who I worked with several people on it earlier. I worked with Ira. We kept it, hoping that we could find a way to share it. I actually have books of printouts of everything, but this is a dream that I think we all had, so that we can all say, if you want to see what's going on in our class, and we will find, once at the end of next week, once everyone's looked through it and we've updated it, we can find a way to promote, for you to share it and to share it to the wider CBST community. Thank you so much. No in-person Shabbat services tomorrow. Tomorrow is all streamed. Monday at 9, we will be opening for member registration for in-person services for next Friday. And I think that's about it. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. One more thing. I'm going to be sending out page numbers for Siddurim that have Psuche de Zimra. So if over the weekend you want to just take a quick look at what is Psuche de Zimra and read through those Psalms on your own, you can. And with
Also,
that,
and we should have a thank you for Harold and Annika, and I think you said Ira, all the
Ira,
people that did all the work
Megan,
collecting this stuff in the
Bet-
first
Betsy
place.
Immersheim did some work on it too. All right. So, Kenternimi, we will accept your offer to make recordings and we'll figure out how best to share them. All right. Bye-bye.